At the far edge of the Orion expanse, where most maps faded into uncertainty and silence ruled the stars, there sat a lonely mining colony named Juno Reach. It was small, isolated, and forgotten by most, just a cluster of domes clinging to a rocky moon rich in rare minerals. The people who lived there weren't soldiers or diplomats. They were miners, engineers, and scientists. Tough, yes, but unarmed and unequipped for what was coming. Their days were simple, digging deep into the moon's crust, scanning for veins of a strange blue ore that powered half the galaxy's energy needs. They had no enemies, no allies, just the cold rock beneath them and the hope that Earth, even from so far away, still remembered them. Then the Carnathi came. Without warning, the skies darkened with jagged alien ships, long spined vessels like metallic predators. The Carnathi swarm, a ruthless coalition of pirates and warlords, had begun moving through the sector, burning colonies and taking whatever they pleased. No one had stopped them yet. When they arrived at Juno Reach, the colony barely had time to send out a distress signal. It was raw, filled with fear, no polished language or protocol, just a shaky voice repeating coordinates, pleading for rescue, warning of the ships surrounding them. The signal echoed into space, repeating over and over, and the silence that answered felt louder than anything. The Galactic Council, a powerful alliance of alien empires and bureaucracies, received the distress call within hours. It was reviewed, logged, and discussed in a brightly lit chamber far from the outer rim. Some council members listened with concern, others with indifference. But when the matter turned to action, everything stopped. Earth, they said, was still a developing species, young, unpredictable, and often troublesome. Why risk a diplomatic crisis to protect a remote outpost so deep in contested space? Especially when the victims were just humans. The motion to send aid was rejected within minutes. One ambassador muttered something that many agreed with silently. They'll be gone before help arrives anyway. Back on Juno Reach, the colony's perimeter shields flickered under the stress of repeated hits. Power cells drained. Food supplies dropped. The children had been moved underground. Parents whispered lies to keep them calm, saying help was on the way, even as they watched the stars with growing dread. The Carnathi were in no hurry. They liked to wait, to let fear grow. Then they would strike all at once. It was how they operated, slow pressure, sharp terror. Every few hours, the emergency signal pulsed again, automated now. The voice of the colony's comms officer, recorded just before he was injured, playing on a loop. Some colonies nearby had picked it up, but none had the strength to help. A few tried to reach the council. Others just stayed silent, pretending they hadn't heard anything. Fear was contagious out here. Inside the command dome of Juno Reach, acting Commander Elara Voss, once a field engineer, stood over a flickering hologram of their position. Her hands trembled slightly, though her voice remained calm as she gave orders to reinforce the airlocks and shut down all non-essential systems. She looked at the empty black around the moon and didn't say what she was thinking. No one needed to hear it. They were all thinking the same thing. No one was coming. They had been left behind. But what no one knew, not Elara, not the Council, not even the Carnathi swarm, was that the signal had reached one final destination. A hidden receiver, buried in an old Terran relay station, had picked up the call, and on a silent command bridge beneath the moon's surface, something ancient and powerful began to awaken. Engines hummed in the dark, cold steel lit up with energy, and across Earth's military channels, one alert repeated once, Fleet Protocol Omega, activated. But in Juno Reach, for now, only fear remained, and the long, terrible wait. Far above the dying colony of Juno Reach, in the shining halls of the Galactic Council, politics moved slower than the speed of sound, and hearts colder than space decided the fate of millions. As reports came in confirming that the Carnathi swarm had broken through Juno's outer defenses, smoke and screams rising from the ground below, the council chambers remained strangely calm. Tall figures in flowing robes spoke in hushed tones, not of rescue or defense, but of caution and neutrality. Earth's representative, Ambassador Ayla Seren, stood before them, a single human woman in a sea of alien delegates, trying for the third time to force a vote for intervention. Her voice carried urgency, even desperation, as she described the situation on Juno Reach. Civilians under attack, communications failing, oxygen reserves dwindling. But every plea she made was met with delayed tactics and hollow sympathies. Some council members barely looked at her, others made quiet excuses. They spoke of treaties, territorial lines, and the risks of angering the Carnathy. One reptilian delegate even suggested that Earth should consider relocating its outer colonies to safer zones. Ayla could hardly believe what she was hearing. These were leaders of powerful worlds, many of whom had relied on Earth's technologies and trade for decades. Now, when a colony full of innocent people faced extinction, they were suggesting surrender. She saw it clearly then, not just cowardice, but something worse, convenience. The council didn't want to confront the Carnathy because they were useful, terrifying, and always just far enough away. No one wanted to be the first to challenge them, so they would let Juno Reach fall, quietly, silently, like it never mattered. Ayla's jaw tightened. She tried one last time, reminding them of the treaties Earth had signed, the taxes they had paid, the aid they had provided during past crises, but nothing changed. A tall, four-eyed diplomat from the Van Consortium calmly explained that direct action would escalate hostilities and that Earth should consider diplomatic alternatives. Ayla said nothing more. She stood still for a moment, looking at them all, dozens of species, hundreds of years old, hiding behind elegant words while human lives burned in orbit. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the chamber. Cameras followed her briefly, but no one stopped her. No one asked what she would do next. They had already dismissed her, the way they had dismissed Earth for years. But Ayla Seren had not given up. The moment she was alone in her private shuttle, she activated a secure channel hidden deep within Earth's old diplomatic systems. It was a relic of the early days when humans still didn't trust their place in the galaxy. Now it had a single purpose. With shaking fingers, she typed out a 12-digit code and sent the message without hesitation. It was short, but it carried the weight of everything she had just witnessed. Activate Fleet Protocol Omega. Back on Juno Reach, fires spread across the colony. The Carnathy had landed small strike teams, raiding power cores and dragging terrified workers into the dark. The shield dome had collapsed hours ago. Acting Commander Elara Voss was injured, but still issuing orders, her uniform scorched and her voice rag. She didn't know if anyone was listening anymore. The emergency beacons were still online, but there had been no response. No ships, no answers. Every corridor echoed with fear, and still the colony fought to survive, holding on to whatever hope remained. And in a hidden command bunker on Luna, buried far beneath Earth's surface, Admiral Marcus Rain received Ayla's message. No fanfare, no alarms, just a soft tone and a glowing red light. He stood slowly from his chair, walked across the room, and opened a sealed panel that hadn't been touched in decades. One command, old but never forgotten, pulsed across secure channels. Earth would no longer wait. No more speeches, no more begging. The Terran vanguard was waking up. And this time, the galaxy would not see them coming. Deep beneath the ancient grey dust of the moon's surface, hidden below the sea of tranquility, a silent chamber came alive. Lights flickered to life in rows. Walls lit up with symbols long forgotten by most, and cold steel breathed again after years of stillness. Admiral Marcus Rain stood alone in the command hall, his hands clasped behind his back, staring at a glowing message that repeated once on the central screen, Fleet Protocol Omega. Confirmed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply turned and walked through the long corridor into the heart of Earth's most guarded secret, the Terran Vanguard Fleet. Built in silence, maintained in shadows, and designed for one purpose: to end wars before they could begin. For over a century, it had waited in orbit, cloaked behind lunar relays and asteroid fields, invisible to even the most advanced alien scans. Most species in the galaxy believed it was a story humans told their children, a fantasy of revenge, of power, of pride. But it was real, and now it was moving. As Rain entered the war room, officers snapped to attention. Dust scattered from old control panels as engineers worked fast to bring the systems online. Artificial intelligences, once dormant, activated in sequence, each one connected to a warship unlike anything the galaxy had seen. On massive screens, the fleet's structure lit up: over 200 ships, each designed in secret and updated over generations. At the core were the dreadnoughts, huge vessels powered by miniaturized stars, guided by AI minds that could outthink 100 fleets at once. Alongside them, Solar Lance cruisers hummed with weaponry that could pierce shields from entire systems away. And wrapped in stealth fields, sleek corvettes shimmered like ghosts, designed to appear only when it was already too late. No speeches were given, no message sent to the Galactic Council. There was no announcement, no formal declaration of war. Earth did not ask for permission, and it did not seek approval. The fleet simply began to launch, one ship after another, sliding silently into orbit, then disappearing into the dark through invisible jump corridors. Their destination was locked: Juno Reach. No one outside Earth's military command knew what was happening. Even Earth's own civilian government had limited access. This wasn't a rescue mission, it was a response. Cold, precise, and unstoppable. Back on the council world of Yelara Prime, where glowing towers rose high above silver seas, alien diplomats continued their quiet conversations. They believed Earth would protest, argue, maybe plead again. None of them had noticed the sudden silence on Earth's defense networks. None of them realized that dozens of Terran listening stations had gone dark, shut off so nothing could leak. Some still spoke confidently in council chambers, mocking Earth's anger as childish. Others were cautious but calm, trusting their sensors to warn them if something changed. But no sensor in the galaxy could see the Terran vanguard when it didn't want to be seen. In the void between stars, the fleet traveled without sound. Navigation systems bent gravity around them, masking their presence. Heat signatures were swallowed into cold shields. Communications were locked. Even the ships themselves didn't speak to one another unless required. It was like watching shadows move through deeper shadows, nothing but silence and intention. And behind every ship, behind every AI system guiding them, stood the minds of humans who remembered what it meant to be abandoned. Juno Reach wasn't just a colony, it was a line, and Earth had drawn it. As Admiral Rain watched the last ship vanish into slip space, he allowed himself one deep breath, not of relief, but of purpose. The time for diplomacy had passed. The Terran vanguard had launched, and somewhere far away, in a colony running out of time, hope was already on its way, even if they didn't know it yet. The galaxy had ignored the warning signs, but now the ghosts of Earth were moving. The sky above Juno Reach turned a sickly red as the last of the colony's shields collapsed with a final crackling groan. Sparks fell like dying stars across the shattered domes, and panic began to spread through the underground shelters where families huddled in silence. Acting Commander Elara Voss stood in the central control hub, her face pale under the emergency lights, watching helplessly as Carnethi warships closed in. There were too many of them, dark, spiked vessels drifting like hungry predators, each one bristling with weapons that had already turned dozens of colonies into lifeless rocks. Alarms screamed through the base, and backup generators failed one by one. There was no help, no fleet, no signal. Elara gave the order to prepare for final lockdown. That was the last defense, sealing the last doors, hiding what few children and injured remained, and hoping the enemy would take resources and leave at least some of them alive. Everyone knew it was a lie, but they followed it anyway. Hope was thin, and even lies gave people something to cling to. Then the sky changed again. Above the moon's surface, space shimmered like heat rising from metal. And then, without warning, the stars themselves seemed to rip open. Massive rifts tore through the void, clean, sharp, and controlled, and from them emerged vessels that no one on Juno Reach had ever seen before. They were silent, black ships with edges that bent the light around them, their hulls shifting color as if they were alive. Not a single nameplate. No signal broadcast, no warning. They didn't need to be announced. The Terran Vanguard fleet had arrived, and it wasted no time. Without hesitation, the fleet opened fire. From the lead dreadnoughts came beams of blue energy so focused they pierced through Carnathi cruisers like paper. Smaller corvettes danced through debris, vanishing from sight only to reappear behind enemy ships and strike with pinpoint lasers. Solar Lance cruisers unleashed streams of molten light that cracked enemy hulls and sent shockwaves across the battlefield. The Carnathi, once so feared and unchallenged, had no time to organize. Their formations crumbled in seconds. Some tried to flee, others fired wildly, but the human fleet moved like a single living organism, every shot precise, every maneuver coordinated. They didn't scream or shout. They didn't threaten. They just destroyed. From below, the people of Juno Reach watched in stunned silence as their enemy, the monsters who had promised to burn their world, were torn apart in front of them. Ships that had loomed above them like gods exploded in waves of fire and twisted metal. Black smoke trails streaked the sky as Carnathi vessels fell, one after another, crashing onto the moon's surface or vanishing in space. For the first time since the siege began, the radio channels filled with something other than static or screams. A single calm voice spoke in clear Terran standard, "Hold position. You are not alone." In orbit, the battle lasted only minutes. But those minutes changed everything. The Carnathi war host, which had brought ruin to dozens of worlds, was broken. Not pushed back, not slowed. Broken. Most of their ships were either destroyed or fleeing, and for the first time in living memory, the galaxy had watched a force that had never been challenged lose, and lose badly. Commander Voss sank into her chair, shaking not from fear, but from the sudden release of it. Around her, cheers erupted. People cried. Others just stared at the ceiling, not believing what they had seen. But above them, in the cold silence of space, Earth's ships remained still, watching, guarding, silent as the void itself. They had not come for applause. They had not come for diplomacy. They had come because someone dared hurt what was theirs. And the galaxy would never forget the day the forgotten humans rose from the shadows and shattered the myth of Carnathi dominance in a storm of light and steel. The silence that followed the battle over Juno Reach felt heavier than war. The sky, once filled with fire and fear, now hung calm and still. Smoke drifted upward in lazy trails from the shattered surface, while broken Carnathi wreckage floated in orbit like forgotten bones. Down on the colony, survivors crawled from shelters and bunkers, blinking into the pale light, unsure whether they were waking from a nightmare or still living in one. Then the Terran dropships began to descend. Dark and smooth, shaped like knives cutting through the clouds, they came not with weapons drawn, but with doors open. From them poured soldiers in black armor, strong, silent, and fast. But they didn't march like invaders. They moved with purpose, scanning collapsed buildings for survivors, setting up mobile hospitals, sharing clean water, power units, and emergency rations. Children stared at them, wide-eyed. Some wept. Some just held onto their mothers and watched. The Terran medics were fast and efficient, treating wounds, calming frightened civilians, and stabilizing power systems. Engineers worked side by side with local technicians, repairing broken comms, patching oxygen lines, and restoring life support. No one asked for thanks. No one gave speeches. There were no flags, no broadcasted anthems, no attempts to control or claim. Earth had sent warriors, yes, But now it sent hands to rebuild. And still, through all of it, the ships in orbit waited quietly, like silent sentinels watching over their own. It was a rescue, not a show. And yet, across the galaxy, everyone was watching. From trade hubs to noble courts, from smuggler stations to research outposts, eyes turned to their screens as something unexpected happened. A single message, unannounced and unencrypted, was broadcast from the lead Terran dreadnought. The signal was clean, strong, and impossible to jam. On every major frequency, the message played only once. It showed no face, no emblem, only the voice of Admiral Marcus Rain. Calm, steady, cold as the void between stars. To those who let them suffer, he said, "We saw you." No anger, no demand, just a truth, delivered like a dagger. The words echoed in council chambers and strategy rooms. They were replayed in news cycles, translated in dozens of languages. On the Alara Prime, where the Galactic Council had met just days earlier, diplomats whispered behind closed doors. The same members who had voted to wait, who had urged for appeasement, now stared at each other in silence. The Carnathi swarm, once considered unstoppable, had been dismantled in minutes. And Earth had done it without warning, without permission, and without asking anyone's approval. Whispers spread faster than any transmission, not just of Earth's fleet, but of what it meant. Humanity, once seen as young and emotional, had revealed a hidden strength no one had expected. The Terran vanguard, a myth until now, had become very real. And their message was not just for the enemies of Earth, but for its so-called allies as well. On Juno Reach, as the last of the wounded were treated and shelters made stable, the Terran soldiers began returning to their ships. They didn't stay for celebrations. They didn't stay at all. Their mission was complete. Civilians stood and watched as the great black vessels lifted into the sky once more, vanishing into the stars like ghosts. But something had changed. The people no longer felt forgotten. And across the galaxy, something else changed too. Fear, yes, but something deeper. Respect, caution, understanding. Humanity had asked for help once and been ignored. Now, they weren't asking anymore. In the quiet corners of space, leaders reviewed old treaties. Military commanders re-examined fleet positions, and the phrase that began on a dozen backwater channels soon made its way into the heart of every political discussion. Humanity is no longer asking. And no one, not even the Carnathi, was sure what Earth might do next. The galaxy stirred like a nest of disturbed creatures after the fall of the Carnathi at Juno Reach. No longer was Earth the quiet observer sitting at the edge of galactic politics. No longer were humans brushed aside with polite smiles and hidden laughter. Now, every diplomat, every leader, and every intelligence agency across the stars had only one focus: Earth. Within days of Admiral Rain's haunting message, alien embassies flooded Earth's communication networks. Races that had once dismissed humanity as loud, emotional, and inexperienced were now sending gifts, treaties, and desperate requests for alliance. On the surface, they offered peace. Behind closed doors, they begged for safety. Everyone had seen what the Terran fleet had done, not just the destruction of Carnathi ships, but the discipline, the precision, the silence. Earth had made no demands, claimed no prizes, and planted no flags. And yet, their power had shaken the galaxy like thunder in deep space. On diplomatic channels, opinions were divided. Some called Earth a stabilizing force, the defenders of the helpless. Others whispered that Earth had become the greatest threat since the ancient wars. But even those who feared humanity couldn't deny what they had witnessed. The Terran vanguard hadn't attacked blindly. They hadn't razed cities or enslaved populations. They had fought with purpose, saved civilians, and then vanished without a word. There was no thirst for conquest, only action where others hesitated. That quiet control frightened many far more than open aggression ever could. Because if Earth could do that without warning, what could they do if they truly chose war? As political storms raged, stories began to travel faster than any official report. Stories from survivors of Juno Reach, who told of armored Terrans carrying injured children across rubble, of medics who refused to rest until every wound was treated, of engineers who worked with bare hands in broken machinery to restore life support. These were not just soldiers, they were protectors. Word spread that the Terran fleet had stood down only after making sure every civilian was safe. And though Earth had every right to demand compensation or influence after such a victory, they asked for nothing. This discipline, this refusal to exploit, shifted perception in a way no weapon could. On Earth, things were changing too, but not in the way the galaxy expected. There were no great celebrations or parades. No speeches from politicians claiming glory. The Vanguard fleet returned to its hidden positions, and Admiral Rain disappeared from the public eye. The message was clear. Earth had not acted for fame, but for principle. Still, in secret bunkers and deep orbital facilities, construction began again. Faster ships, smarter AIs, newer weapons. Earth wasn't standing down. It was preparing, watching, learning, not for revenge, not for fear, but for readiness. They had seen how easily the galaxy turned its back on the weak. They wouldn't let that happen again. Within Earth's research stations, scientists worked around the clock. Materials pulled from ancient asteroids were refined into hulls that could bend light and time. Engineers developed pulse engines that whispered through space. AI minds, once limited to simulations, now guided tactical drills in real time. The fleet would not just remain strong, it would evolve. Earth knew the attention of the galaxy was now on them, and they intended to meet it with quiet strength, not arrogance. And in every shadowed council room across the stars, races that once dismissed humanity now watched with unease. Some sought alliance, hoping to stand beside this new force. Others built walls, fearing what would happen if they ever stood against it. But no matter their choice, one truth had become impossible to deny. Earth was no longer the outsider, no longer the underdog. Humanity had risen from whispers to legends. And somewhere beyond the noise of politics and fear, in the quiet heart of a growing world, Earth simply continued to build, watching, waiting, and ready for whatever came next. The winds of Juno Reach carried a different sound now. Not the sirens of war or the cries of desperation, but the laughter of children playing under the pale skies. Where once smoke had risen from shattered domes, there were now rebuilt homes with stronger walls and new lights glowing through the night. The colony, once left to die in silence, now stood protected by an invisible shield, one made not of force fields or weapons, but of certainty. Everyone knew now. Earth would come. The fear that had taken root in every heart during the siege was replaced by a quiet, growing pride. People returned to their duties. Farmers grew food again in domed fields. Engineers worked with determination. Schools reopened. And high above, even though no one could see them, Terran satellites watched patiently from orbit, their quiet presence a silent promise that this place would never be forgotten again. Across the galaxy, the shockwaves of Earth's intervention still rippled outward. In the cold corners of space, where the broken remnants of the Carnathi swarm drifted like wounded animals, fear had taken hold. Ships that once moved boldly now traveled in shadows, afraid to light their engines too brightly or send open transmissions. Every time they crossed into unknown space, they glanced behind, terrified of seeing a Terran signature flare to life in the distance. The glowing blue trails of Earth's ships had become a ghost story among the scattered warbands, one they spoke of in hushed tones, never quite sure if the humans were still hunting them. But they didn't take chances. The Carnathi weren't just beaten, they were changed, haunted, broken in a way that weapons alone couldn't explain. In the Galactic Council, power shifted like never before. The public called for answers. Why had they ignored the cries from Juno Reach? Why had they sat in silence while people begged for help? One senior council member, known for advocating diplomatic delay, stepped down in disgrace after a leaked recording revealed he believed a few human lives are acceptable losses. Another council voice, previously neutral, made history by publicly thanking Earth on the floor of the assembly, calling the Terran response a standard of honor we all failed to meet. His speech was brief but powerful. It ended with a single sentence that spread like wildfire through the public networks. Perhaps humanity isn't behind us, but ahead. On media channels, historians and analysts rewrote old files. New documentaries detailed the timeline of the battle, the design of Terran ships, the silence of their movements, the precision of their strikes. Children on distant worlds began drawing pictures of the black, sleek Terran cruisers, marking them not with fear, but with admiration. Soldiers across alien worlds studied human tactics, trying to understand how a fleet could move like a shadow and strike like lightning. Military academies added Earth's actions at Juno Reach to their required reading. It became the new case study of decisive intervention. Some still doubted Earth's intentions, of course, but even those who feared them had to respect them. And all across space, one line began to be spoken again and again, often in awe, sometimes in regret, always in truth. They thought no one would come. Until Earth did. And Earth stayed silent. It returned to its quiet development, not flaunting its power, not demanding anything from those it saved. But something fundamental had changed. The galaxy now understood. Humanity would not stand by while its own were in danger. They didn't seek empire. They didn't crave thrones. But if the weak cried out, and no one else answered, Earth would, without warning, without permission, with fire if needed, but always with purpose. Juno Reach had become more than a colony. It was now a symbol, a reminder to the forgotten, a warning to the cruel. Because someone had come when no one else would, and the stars would remember.